Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I realized, Callow, the double dip for me, the all-time double dip is unattainable. The Nationals playing Thursday, April 17th in Pittsburgh at 12:30, leading into Caps Penguins season finale in Pittsburgh, where it's possible that Ovi could break the record there that night. April 17th is part of Montgomery County spring break, and we're already accounted for.
No dice for you. You blew it on that one.
How many years have we gone through the schedule every year and I go, where are the two teams playing in the same place at the same time? I do this whenever we get the Commander schedule. I look and I'm like, are we going to get lucky and catch another team locally? And just so we have the full weekend with the local teams. And here is like an all-timer, because if you haven't been to the Pirates ballpark, it's amazing. And it's a 12:30 first pitch leading into the regular season finale. Too good.
I've got a feeling that place is going to be red the whole entire day. I mean, that's just like whether Ovechkin's breaking the record or not. That's just a good sports day. Like, this happens on the calendar sometimes where you can double dip a couple of times. Great ballpark. Go see the Nats at 12:30. Then go see the Caps play their rivals on the last regular season game of the year. Whether he's going for the record or not, that's just a great sports day. So, yeah, if you can pull that one off, which I think now, as you just mentioned, a lot of people on spring break, I think there's going to be a ton of Washington fans in Pittsburgh.
Yes, there will be he broke the record this night. Every subsequent game after that is breaking the record again, though.
That's right. Yes. That's right. Yeah, it could be the last one. Yeah.
It's not like he's going to stop when he gets one goal past Gretzky. In fact, he's going to play a whole other season for all we can tell. So every night's going to be a record break opportunity.
That's right. Yes, exactly right. So, yeah.
So that's where we're at. Okay. Let me get into some of the football here. Laremy Tunsil spoke yesterday. Got to hear from him. He, by the way, sir, you could do voiceover work. Okay. That's number one. Dulcet tones. He's got the voice of God. I loved everything he had to say, including, very wisely, just said, I'm not upset at Houston. Don't worry about it. Nothing personal. I get it. They want to keep their young guys together. And right on cue, they had this crazy signing of Derek Stingley that was like $5+ million above what every other corner was making. That's the second time that's happened now in like this offseason, where I'm like, why are people resetting to that point? I don't understand why they're jumping it that much, but that's another conversation. But that was smart. So he avoided that landmine altogether. He said over and over and over, I don't take this personally. I understood why they did it. They did it because they want to sign Stroud and Stingley and their receivers and Will Anderson, and they can't afford everybody, and I'm 30. I get it. And then he turned to Washington, and the line of the lines was, I can't wait to block for Jaden Daniels. So good. And so for when, you know me, first impressions matter. And his first impression, smart, been around the block, understands what happened, isn't sour about anything, and he's ready to go. So I was very, very pleased with his press conference.
No, very even keeled. I listened to it yesterday as well. I actually liked the line of questioning of, I forget who it was that asked him, was like, what are you doing to take care of yourself so you can play until like Trent Williams' age? And he was like, I'm doing everything I can to stay at that level. Essentially, that would put me at, I think he said 16 seasons, because this is season 10 for him. And then he was also asked, you already touched on it a little bit there, but he was asked about like any bitter feelings about the Texans, and does he come in with a chip on his shoulder? And he's like, I always play with the chip on my shoulder. I don't need that essentially to be motivated. That this has happened twice now. It doesn't really matter. So I like that attitude as well, that I think you just know what you're going to get with this guy, that he's not going to flare up or flare down in terms of his attitude. He seems very even keeled, which I really do like. And I think you need along an offensive line.
In general, this is what I heard about him after we acquired him from some people in Houston. They said, he'll do this opening press conference, but if it's up to him, you'll never hear from him again. He's one of those. He doesn't want anything really to do with the media. Marshawn Lattimore, same way. After we acquired him, he wanted nothing to do with speaking to anybody. But when he did do the press conferences, they were like 2-second answers. Like, I'm just ready to play. Can't wait. See you there. You know, like that was like his whole thing. This guy actually was quite eloquent and seemed willing and ready to talk about everything and wasn't shocked by any question and answered everything perfectly. So I would say to you, Laremy, talk to us. Don't ignore us. I've heard you're not big on talking to the media. I get it. Some players don't have anything to do with it, but you're good at it. So I would just tell you, maybe make yourself available this year and moving forward.
You know how this works too, though. We've dealt with athletes over the years that are fine doing it in the off season, and then they don't want to be touched during the season. So like that could have also been off season. Laremy likes to talk to the media. In season might give you the Lattimore treatment, the Marshawn Lynch treatment of I'm just here so I don't get fined, essentially. So that could also be a factor here.
All right, so we got some of that. He was asked one pointed question, which was about his contract. He has 2 years left on it. I haven't heard about anything of restructuring with Marshawn Lattimore. He's got 2 years left after Adam Peters acquired him. I think after last year, it'd be hard for him to go to the Commanders and ask for something different. It's going to be a show me this year. And then we could talk about it beyond that. If you get back to health and you look like the Pro Bowl corner again, Deebo Samuel, he's in his last year of his contract. So I haven't heard anything about the restructuring or doing anything. So we'll have to see. I'm going to wait and see on that one. I don't want to make a judgment on that. I feel like Lattimore's won't be restructured because there are 2 years left. Deebo, I'm not sure like how they're going to do. They want to acquire him and have him play out the string only to get to the other side. I don't know. So I'm waiting to see his press conference because I want to see who asks him about that, how that's brought up. And then once Peters talks to the media, I'm sure that's going to come up about him. Are you willing to like play this out or are you going to talk to him? Tunsil, he was asked about his contract. He's got 2 years left. And the way he put it was, they know how I feel about this, but that's all I'm going to say about it. So I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that typically sounds like, I would like to restructure this and extend out. And I don't know how the Commanders feel about that. And I have to think that considering, Tunsil was put out on the trade market. He talked to other teams. I don't think this is ever a secret when you acquire a guy. How are you going to feel about playing on your current contract? So I'm sure they knew how he feels. What will they do about it? I don't know. And with 2 years left and him at 30, my gut would say play out this year and don't mess with the contract. And then when you got 1 year left, we'll talk about it with you. But the way he said it made me feel like if there was one they're going to redo to try to make sure that he's happy, it might be his. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm sure Adam Peters even said to him, play this year out. If you block your ass off for Jaden Daniels, we're going to want you moving forward. Like, it's not that far-fetched for him to just say, let's see how you fit in here, and then we'll go ahead and hand you that contract because we're going to need you regardless. I also, that's why I kind of mentioned that questioning of what are you doing to take care of yourself to play for 6 or 7 more years to get that third big contract extension. I'm not surprised that was at least broached yesterday. From the sound of it, though, it is, hey, I do want a new deal, but I'm sure there is some mutual understanding of let's play this 1 year out because there are 2 years left on your deal. One of the more interesting things I read about on this one, too, I think there was a ESPN Plus article on free agency and trade grades so far this season. And for the Texans and the Commanders, they gave the Commanders a B- for getting Tunsil and the Texans a B for acquiring Tunsil or for trading Tunsil, getting all the draft picks. What was interesting is in that article, it said if the Commanders were to actually give him a different contract right now, they would actually lower the grade because they think the number that he's at right now is a part of this deal. And I thought that was interesting that they would even go on to mention something like that, but it does make sense. Part of the appeal is that they're only paying him that number for the next 2 years, and maybe it's just a year, but that is a part of the trade too, is that they didn't have to give him that extension is basically what I'm getting all the way around to say.
That's been this is where we are on all this stuff now. And this is why the Trey Hendrickson thing didn't go anywhere yet with anybody, because what you have to pay somebody goes into the compensation that the team gets back. And that's just kind of baked into the deals now. And the Commanders gave up a premium to get Laremy Tunsil, but he's a Pro Bowl left tackle when he's at his best. And the real complaint about him a year ago was penalties. most of it false starts. Not a ton of he didn't give up a ton of sacks. He's still one of the best pass blockers in the NFL. You would assume that would move forward here because he doesn't have a lot of injury history or anything like that. And if you can clean up the false start stuff, then it looks like it's great. They did give up a haul, though, to get him. But that's because he's not making whatever the top tier number is off of the trade. So I agree with that. And I don't Peters and company haven't been around long enough to know how do they handle these situations. If someone came to them in advance and asked for money, we just don't know yet. Like Cosme's contract was up. They gave him a very large extension. McLaurin, I think they're going to extend because it's his last year and they can lower his cap number this year. I think that's what they're going to do, but I'm not totally sure. I mentioned Lattimore earlier. They haven't done anything with his contract yet. He's got 2 years left. They acquired him with 2.5 years left. I don't think they're going to do anything with it. They're going to make him play it out, make sure that he remains hungry, to get the next contract. Debo, I'm waiting to see because I think that one's tricky. You acquired him not for one season. There's no way you acquired him to have one season, albeit it wasn't for very much, 5th round pick. So we'll have to see how they handle that one. And in this case, this will be a litmus test for them. Would they, if Tunsil wants a different deal, and I'm sure he does, if they say to him, no, you're going to play it out this year, then I think you learn about what their thought process is about contracts and moving forward. He does have 2 years left. There is no rush to do anything with it. The number's pretty good. Their cap space remains pretty good this year. Next year's the year that they can get all the cap savings if they were to extend him out. So that's what I think will happen. And it does feel like that they're, hardball's the wrong word for it because they haven't pissed anybody off yet. But maybe Dante Fowler. He'd probably be the only one that kind of publicly stated that. But look at what he got on the open market. It wasn't like some massive deal. He got a 1 year, under $10 million deal off of a double-digit sack season. So they're right about his market value too. So they're on it. And they don't seem to have pissed too many people off yet. So let's see how they handle all this stuff.
I would say this too. Look at the comparison of both of those guys with Tunsil and Fowler. Fowler got pissed off and mouthed off on Twitter about negotiations. Tunsil, here's a guy that was supposed to be a top 3 pick, drops a little bit in the draft, gets traded 2 times, and just had nothing else to say except this is a business. I understand it. And that was on both times he's been traded. So I think that was also a part of this as well, as a little bit of the attitude of how do you handle some of these negotiations? Are you going to take it personally that we're going to run this ship like a professional, operation, essentially? I think there's something to be said about how both of those guys interacted with their respective teams. And for, as you just said, Fowler's case, he still just got that 1 year deal. I'm not saying it's not a way to live life or anything, but it's not like you earned this big extension going elsewhere anyways. And then you have Tunsil that has basically just gone on and said, this is a business. I'm going to play this out. And he's already said, I have already let it be known how I feel about my contract, but didn't say I'm not going to play under this deal or whatever. It's totally kind of like two ends of the spectrums of how you're being a professional in the year 2025 at this point.
And I don't want to put any words in his mouth because he didn't say either way, I'm pissed about my contract. He just said they're aware, which is I'm sure means, yes, I would like to redo and get a lot more money, but let's see how the Commanders handle it. I am not the person to do this, and I can't do this. But God, do I so badly want to talk to him about his pre-draft situation. God, because it's NFL history. It really is. And I would actually come at it from the point of view as I would bring the pictures of mine that I hope my kids never find that were taken of me from in college to show him that's all of us, buddy. I didn't have a gas mask, but that's actually all of us. There is an album from my first couple of years of college of pictures that were taken that I can't believe I kept, that when I ran into it a couple of years ago, I went, my kids can't find this. This needs to be they're going to look at this and go, who were you? Because the pictures say not 1,000 words, 1,000,000 words about what your mindset was when you were that age. And so to Laremy, I would just say, dude, I understand. We all make, whether you call that a mistake or not, we've all been there when we were young and did something that we shouldn't have done, but yours got publicized and cost you millions of dollars. I'm so dying to talk to him about that, but I'm the wrong person to do it because I'd get fired. So I can't have that conversation, but I would be dying to do it. And I would totally come at it from I get it. Look at this. This was me at that age too.
I mean, at the same time, too, like he's 5 years younger than I am. And I grew up in the era of like, oh, whoever had the digital camera would upload all those pictures on Facebook. And Facebook isn't even the same thing that it was when I was in college. And the amount of scrubbing that my generation, the millennials, have had to do of like, why do we post a whole entire album of pictures of a random Friday or Saturday night in college? I don't know,
Correct.
but it happened. And like, that's just a microcosm of growing up in this era now. You pull your phone out, you video yourself doing stupid things. That's basically what runs the internet at this point. And everybody does it. Like, we're at the point now where who doesn't have one of those videos of you doing something that you probably are not proud of posting on the internet like that? And in his case, too, completely harmless. Like, it was hurting nobody. And in fact, like, is completely legal in most places now at this point. Like, I'm with you. I would love to know like what the reaction was to that. And I think you and I were doing the show at the time when that actually did drop. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, some team's going to get a steal by drafting him.
That's right.
Because it was nothing. Like, that really didn't mean anything. It was just the optics of drafting him that night. And the Dolphins got a steal with him because he was supposed to be picked 3 or 4 picks higher.
It's one like, I wonder if he knows who released it. Like,
Yeah,
I wonder if he knows
Yeah.
that, because whoever did that, and I'm assuming it's an opposing agent because there's a lot of money on the line. So it had to have been another agent. It basically, like, that was dirty politics of all dirty politics of the NFL. It was one of the first times that it was like so obvious that they were going to do something to force draft stock to tank immediately overnight. And we were like, wow, that's a pretty low move. Like, even if you have to decide if you have information like that, because it's really, I mean, even then when it was still illegal, like, it was really just embarrassing. It wasn't like anybody looked at it and was like, oh God, he's a terrible person. It was just embarrassing that they showed it to the same degree. Like, if somebody showed these pictures that I'm talking about of mine, you'd be like, oh my God, like, what was wrong with you? And it's without fail, because I'm a different generation. We didn't have cell phones back in college. Like, every time I'm out with my old friends, all of us at some point mention, thank God we didn't have that when we were in college. Because could you imagine the evidence that would exist of all of us that was out there? But it doesn't, because someone had to use an old camera and actually print the picture out to actually have it.
That's right. No, that is exactly right. Like I said, I grew up in it. And I think what happens too is you essentially, like, you just learn that, oh, people have their phones out. You're going to not be going as crazy as normal. Like, I learned that like very quickly in college, that like, oh, this, like, essentially someone's always got a camera out at this point. This whole generation has now grown up in that whole entire scene that some kids have had cameras pointed at them since they've been born, essentially. So yeah, the vibe is completely different at this point. The funny part with his was it was clearly like a personal video. He didn't like put it like out there or whatever. And I thought the other factor of that video being released was, I thought the risky factor was, if it wasn't an agent, it could have been a team. And then you run the risk if you're the team. I remember when it happened, I went, how do we know the Dolphins weren't the team to actually put it out there so he would fall to them and then have to run the risk of being like, oh yeah, it was us. And then they actually draft him. I thought that was another layer to all that no one really talked about as well.
I mean, this was the NFL's version of the Access Hollywood tape. They like did it right at the last minute to try to tank him, and it worked.
Yeah.
And so again, like, I would love to have what I think is on the level, non-accusatory, I've been there sorta conversation just to hear his perspective on it, but I'm the wrong person to do that. Anyway, let's see what else. Ronnie Stanley admits he gave Baltimore a discount. All the reporting of what the Commanders or Patriots, because that sounds like the two teams that were really interested in him before free agency opened, and he never got there because the Ravens gave him a new deal before free agency opened. They all assigned numbers to what they were giving him, which, if that was true, and I can't believe it was, because you're not allowed to do that. Right. Remember, like, all that reporting came out and they were like, well, they were going to offer him this. And I'm like, one, our front office doesn't talk to anybody, so you don't know that. Two, they aren't allowed to do that. In the same way that, like, wink, wink, Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford ran into each other in Montana, that shouldn't actually be happening either. So it's not like, I don't want to play naive and dumb, like we don't know this, but like, by Stanley admitting that I gave them a discount, it does validate a little bit that he knew that he would have gotten more, whether it's here or somewhere else. So I think the NFL needs to wrap their arms. Maybe there's just no way to do it, that they need to wrap their arms around this a little bit more, because he's all but admitting by saying this, I gave him a discount. How do you know you gave him a discount? You never got to free agency. So why would you be able to say something like that when supposedly no one was allowed to talk to you until Monday? And I'm not naive and dumb and don't think that these things don't happen anyway, but I think the NFL needs to maybe get a little more, like, they tried to end the ridiculous. Remember, Hainsworth got the biggest contract ever at 12:01 at the start of free agency. And that's impossible to have negotiated in 1 minute. So it was stupid, that like, it was just dumb that that's what was happening. And I don't want to pretend like I know this stuff isn't happening. They're not all talking to one another, but they've got to wrap their hands around it, because like when he comes out and just says that, he's not saying we were going to offer him more, but he's saying somebody was. And he says it in a way where he goes, I know that I'm doing this for Baltimore. And then he said all the nice things about the Ravens, but it's just another admission in a way of saying free agency really starts way before you think free agency starts.
Well, this is why when they decided to do the legal tampering period, I thought it was so dumb, because all you did was move up the talking more. Like, so now instead of at 12:01, the deal being done, oh, well, now it's just being talked about at 12:01 noon, midday of the legal tampering period. Like, for me,
what's even the difference though? Like, legal tampering period, it's really the start of free agency, and these deals happen like overnight. The second it opens up, you've got at 12:01 again, there were like players being signed again.
Right. Now, I will say this, we have had instances over the years where, because of that window, we've had one or two signings that didn't happen, but they weren't like the top tier signings. Like, I forget who a couple of them are. We had one here. Remember, JD McKissick was supposed to go to Buffalo, and then Ron didn't know that, and then they got him to come back, right? Like, we've had a couple of those, but it's not been anything crazy. So
those are the ones though, like when that happens, you're like, everyone else is talking. Why aren't you?
I mean, we could
How
say
do you not know that they're signing your player?
We could say a million things about the last regime. I tried not to get into it, but it's just like with every passing day, it was like the worst roster management maybe of all time, which is saying something with this franchise. But yeah, like what I'm getting at though is that legal tampering, like those couple of days or whatever it is, it's not the biggest difference in the world. We've just seen one or two deals fall through because of it. All it did was move up the talking stage. And what I would say is this is, maybe it's not Stanley talking to these teams directly. It's clearly his agent at least putting it's his agent putting his feelers out there. And look, at the end of the day, he doesn't have to say Ronnie Stanley. He's going, I have a very good tackle. That's a client. What do you think you'd be willing to give up for something like that? That's all the conversation has to be. And that's not tampering at the end of the day. So like, that's what I believe actually happened.
Yeah, probably. I mean, like, yeah, that's semi the workaround. I guess there's really nothing anybody can do. If you're going to hold off, you can't have free agency start until after the Super Bowl.
Of course.
Right? You can't have that. And then you give it a month because the teams in the playoffs are, quote unquote, behind the eight ball a little bit. So you give them a little bit of a breather to catch up and get up with the market. But like, I don't know. I guess there is nothing to do about it. How are you going to stop this from happening? You're not. Like, what I don't like is maybe the NFL needs to get a hold on the reporting leaks about it. Like, it's one thing, like the second that it's open, report all you want, say all you want. It's the 3 days before when someone's saying, well, they would give him this. How in the world would you know that? You're not even supposed to be talking to them right now, but obviously they are. And then he's all but confirming it by admitting he gave them a discount. Like, so he's saying, I knew that I could have got more money if I went somewhere else. Wink, 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 whoever that may be. Whatever. Like, I don't, maybe I'm complaining about nothing here, but it's just like they don't seem to have their arms wrapped around stopping all of it. If these guys are admitting that they knew a week ago that I did something that was helpful to the team I was with.
To counterpoint, I do think the league doesn't really care about that, only because it does mean they get to double dip. All of the reporting comes out. It's a wave of, free agency, and then they get to re-announce everything officially once the league year actually goes through, then do all of the press conferences and stuff. When you think about it in that sense, the NFL already was taking over the news cycle for a day or two during free agency. Now they get to kind of like re-dip, the ink back in essentially, because you have to actually go back and see all of those signings. Because I will say this, there's one thing in the NFL and with free agency that does happen, and even I'm guilty of it when I went through and looked through some of the signings yesterday. There's some that slip through the cracks that like you kind of forget. You're like, oh crap, that's right. The Vikings did sign 1 million players, and oh, they look really good now. Like a lot of times, some of it slips through. So I think the NFL also kind of thought we can double dip on this and also get some reaction, from it from a second time as well.
I mentioned this earlier, but Derek Stingley did sign a massive contract with Houston. After the Tunsil trade, I talked to some people in Houston. Whenever we get somebody like this, I want to find out, like, what was he like to deal with? All that stuff, like stuff I don't talk a lot about here, but like, what's he like? What's he like to deal with? All of that stuff. But then I'm like, of course, the big question is, why in the world would you trade somebody that good? And there were two things that came up when they talked about it. And one was the offensive line had a really bad year down there, like to the point where a couple of people I talked to described it as that was the toxic unit on the team. And it really went sideways, right? And they decided that they needed a reboot, they needed a restart, and they wanted actually to start focusing on, and I thought this was weird because multiple people told me this, that they want to become better at run blocking. And I'm sitting there going, you have CJ Stroud and these receivers. What are you talking about? But whatever, like that's what they were talking about. And then they said secondarily, Stroud's contract's coming up. Anderson's contract's going to come up. They've already given some money to the receivers because they had to, and they need to, and Stingley. And they said they've just decided they want to keep this young group together. And I don't blame them for that. And then, so right on cue, that's when this contract popped up. It didn't surprise me that they did it because they said one of the main reasons Tunsil was traded was to ensure that young guys like Stingley got the money they deserved. This is the second time, and I understand with Myles Garrett because he scared the crap out of Cleveland, and he is the best at his position. And so I don't know, overpaid's the right word, but they reset the market for him. Derek Stingley got $5 million more a year than J.C. Horn just got, and that was the highest contract for a cornerback. So why? Like I think he's really good. I think he should stay there. I think he should have gotten a big contract, but why 20% more than the other one? Like I didn't understand that part of it.
I don't know what the actual contract looks like, but my first prediction whenever this stuff starts to happen is it's a GM trying to get out ahead of what's coming. And essentially, I don't know if the money, if they give them more up front, that it helps the cap later on. That's my assumption. I don't know though. I haven't looked at the contract. The other thing is, thing that got lost in free agency a little bit this year was that report that came out that said the cap is going up for like the next 4 seasons or whatever the number is. I think it's 3 seasons maybe, where maybe you have teams like the Texans that are going, hey, they're telling these players, this is what this number is. We're going above market. So don't come back to us in 2 years to try to get the next number, no matter how you're playing. Like, I think some teams are taking this approach now of trying to tell these players, this is the number we're going to give you. We're going above and beyond right now. Don't come back at us. And we don't want to hear about a holdout in 2 years, essentially. I think there are some teams and some franchises that are going like telling these players, hey, we need you to remember right now how much more we're giving you so you don't come back to us and try to hold out again. I think that's what's happening.
With Garrett, I get it. He totally squeezed them. He's like, I want out of here. And they're like, we're going to give you this contract. You can't turn it down. And he didn't turn it down. And then he has to twist himself in a pretzel to try to tell people it wasn't about money. Of course it was. Like, otherwise, you wouldn't have resigned. Like, if you said the whole time it's not about money, but then you resigned with them, well, then it was. So whatever. So he did that. In this case, like, he's a really good young player. I have no issue with them giving him a big contract. I just found it odd that it was that much higher than everyone else's, because I don't think anyone's calling him Deion Sanders. Like, it was just a bit of a surprise. That's all.
Yeah.
The one other one that popped up was this. So this is like, anytime they sign anybody, I'm just like, this is ridiculous. So the Eagles got Azeez Ojulari on a 1-year deal for like no money whatsoever. For Commander fans who were like, he's an edge, we could have got him, look at the price. This not the person I was looking at or wanted. If they had gotten him as a backup or as a specialist pass rusher, I'm totally down for that. He's not an edge setter. I think there is a little bit of confusion about what that is. Dante Fowler's back with the Cowboys because they wanted to get better and stout on the edge against the run. Fowler is an outstanding pass rusher. And as a situational player with Micah Parsons on the other side, he's outrageously good. And I think on this team, if he played less snaps and was out there more for like third downs, I think it would have been great. But they got exposed on the edges, and they need to get better and stouter on the edge. Ojulari is not that person either. Hassan Reddick is not that person. I know he just signed with Tampa Bay. Neither one of them are that person. I had interest in him too, but not as a starting defensive end, as a situational pass rusher. And in that case, the Eagles got a deal because they got somebody who's going to come out there who's going to make an impact for $4 million. And like, it sucks every time they get someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I can describe the Eagles right now is it's like their foundation has been built up brick by brick. So then when you add the nice little touch like Ojulari, it looks really good because guess what? He's going to go along with that defensive line and get the one-on-one matchup every single time. Like, this is what happens when the team is built up so well that these signings put you over the top a little bit. I'm with you. This wasn't someone that the Commanders, it would have made the same impact as he's going to make with Philadelphia. Philadelphia is just built up so much more that this helps them a lot more.
He won't be out on the field a ton unless they have injuries. He's going to be out there in situational spots, though, and that's what's going to suck. When they have third and long and he's out on the field, he's a problem. All right, we'll be right back. Brett wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. The Cowboys have basically signaled they will draft a quarterback now. Cooper Rushhan goes to Baltimore. That's an odd backup for Lamar. I mean, they're just so wildly different players that, like, I loved when Snoop Huntley was there because I'm like, nobody's Lamar, but at least stylistically, it's the same type of player. He's actually kind of mobile and he can move around. That's obviously not Cooper Rush, but he's a very good back. Like, I said this about him. I'm like, I don't know why the Cowboys would let him go. He's a really good backup. Like, I wouldn't want him playing 17 games, but in a couple of moments, he beat us again last year. He's a pretty good backup. But this signaled exactly what they said they were going to do. Trey Lance is gone. Now Rush is gone. Guess what? Dak's replacement is going to happen. I don't know at what level of the draft, but his replacement's going to be picked this year.
I mean, to be fair, the Cowboys have been pretty good at getting mid-round quarterbacks and guys that are not in the first round to actually lead their franchise. So it's one thing I will give Dallas credit for. Like, Tony Romo was undrafted. Dak was a mid-round pick. For Cooper Rush, too, by the way, like, I thought there should have been a little more buzz about him. Like, I thought he managed that Cowboys offense pretty well down the stretch. Like, remember, they kept playing hard. He had them very competitive. He honestly should have beat the Commanders twice. Like, it took a last-second touchdown for the Commanders to beat him the second time around. I thought his market would have been a little bit more. I think for the Ravens, this is just them going, our offense, when Lamar is out, takes such a dip that even guys stylistically like Snoop Huntley can't will them to victory. Rush maybe can, though, as long as he manages the game okay. We saw it happen in Dallas that, like, he doesn't turn the ball over a ton, make egregious turnovers. It can actually, like, sometimes pull them out of a hole a little bit. I like the signing for Baltimore. I think Rush is actually pretty good. As I said, as you just said, I wouldn't take him for 17 games, but if Lamar goes down for 1, 2, 3 games, I kind of trust him to run that offense. So, yeah. I will say I like Rush going to Baltimore. I like that.
I think he's a very good professional backup. And if you have to lead on him for a couple of games and Derrick Henry gets 60 carries,
right? Exactly.
You might be all right. Like, you might find yourself on the other side and you'll be okay. For Dallas, this is interesting. A couple of years ago when Dak got hurt and they had a really good team and it ruined their season because they didn't prioritize having a backup quarterback. They're clearly going to have a rookie as their backup quarterback. And I would assume it's not going to be a high pick. However, what if Shador is there? Like, I don't know. Like, he's a wild card. Some people are saying he'll go number 3, and other people are saying he may drop. And the Cowboys, I don't remember what the number was. I don't think they've used a first round pick on a quarterback since Troy Aikman. I think that's the year. So it's been forever. And then if they do draft Shador, it's just screaming for Deion's going to be the coach in a year or two. So, because, like, at that point, then it's going to be hard for him not to. So let's see what happens here.
Yeah, no, I mean, either way, I think they're drafting somebody. And as I said, it's something that they've actually done really well with Dak being a mid-round pick and Romo being undrafted. Like, that's over, 15 years of quarterback play, 15, 20 years of quarterback play that they've gotten without having to draft someone really, really high. It's probably one of the best things the Cowboys have been able to do in the modern era.
I think Quincy Carter is the highest pick they've had at quarterback since Troy Aikman. He was a second-round pick. Dak was either a third or a fourth-round pick, if I remember right. Romo was he undrafted or a
undrafted?
He was undrafted.
He was undrafted. He sat on the bench for a while. Like he was there for
they've done
years.
well with that. They've done really well with that, albeit, their fans will tell you they haven't won anything. Because they, like, after Washington went to the NFC Championship game, they've got the longest streak of not making the NFC Championship game now.
Right.
So we'll see. I thought this one was interesting. I don't know if you saw this quote. Olamide Zaccheaus, of course, signed with the Bears. And so he's going to have the unique perspective of having played with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. He'll be the first to be able to do that, catch passes from both. I loved him. And I was a little surprised we didn't bring him back. I really liked having him. He was one of those. He got name checked so many times by Quinn as a locker room guy who works his butt off, super smart, that whole thing. I thought they would bring him back as part of the receiving corps, but they didn't. Anyway, he goes there and they just asked him, what do you think about Caleb Williams? And he said the game needs to slow down for him, but he's got all the talent. I would love after this season to have a truth-telling moment from him off there. He's the second one. I want the Tunsil story, and then after this season, I want to ask him, okay, who you got, Jaden or Caleb, after this next season?
No, I agree with you on that one. All this one said to me about needing to slow the game down was this is exactly what we knew, though. Caleb Williams' offensive 100%. line was so terrible. He was rushing so much last year, basically from the get-go. And look at what the Bears have done. It's why you and me are both kind of high on the Bears they totally revamped their offensive line. They totally, put an under construction sign on, traded and signed for just about every position on that offensive line, and why I think they're going to be better. But we've also had the wool pulled over our eyes with the Bears a couple of times, especially last year with the moves that they've been made. Caleb, the game is going to slow down. It wasn't going to happen last year, though, with all the duress he was under.
No, and also it was a mistake from the guy. I've seen this a million times. If the coach is on the hot seat, he's a defensive coach, they should have made that change with Caleb right then and there. Yep. And I said it last year. I said, I don't know whether this guy deserves to be fired or not. The time's just not right that time's up with Caleb. You need to go in a different direction, and they blew it. So they blew his rookie year. Let's see I came out of last year going, I'm not worried about him. I love our guy. Trust me. I don't think we made the wrong decision here. And I have no regrets that they did that. Maybe they do, but I still think he's going to be very good. In fact, this is going to go down, I think, as one of the best quarterback classes ever, because I think he's going to be good. We already know what Jaden is. I think Drake May is going to be good.
Yep.
I think with Vrabel now, he's probably going to have a really good situation because their defense will get better or give him an opportunity to kind of grow into the role a little bit. We haven't seen JJ yet, and Nick's turned out to be a hit for Denver. I mean, this is going to go down as one of the best quarterback classes ever, I think.
And you say all that, and I thought Penix looked okay too.
I forgot about Penix. I think Penix, he actually scares me more than May and Caleb does at this point. I actually think he could be really, really good.
You just don't know how long he can play because he is a little bit older than those guys. Yeah. But I'm with you. I saw Penix in that Atlanta game. You know what? He's not panicking. He's not making all the throws. But that was start number one. And I don't know. You couldn't have asked for much more of a guy starting his first career game in that situation.
No, that one. Well, that was the second start. He'd played the
second start. You're right. Yeah.
Right. So that was a risky thing to do, to put a rookie out there at the last minute like that. And I'm not surprised that it didn't go perfectly for him because he had no timing on the long routes, none. And I mean, that's, he hasn't been taking first team reps the whole year. So I'm not surprised, but I forgot about him. He scares me too, but he scared me coming out of college. I was like, that guy of all of them, him and Jaden are the accurate ones of the five that came out. They're the really, really accurate players. They're also mobile. He's not mobile like Jaden is, but again, this is really shaping up to looking like it's going to be an NFL altering draft class because we haven't seen JJ yet. What if JJ's good too? They're all good. And that's the point about Caleb here. I know everyone's jumping on him, but I watched him and I went, same thing. I said, when things slow down for him or they put him in a position to not try to be a hero all the time, he's going to be good. They're all going to be good.
The other, to your point of making it a altering type class, you and I talk about it every single year about how the AFC, those teams, the teams that don't overreact to losing in the playoffs are the ones that are going to keep going far because it's Mahomes beating Allen, beating Lamar, and beating Burrow. Like those top quarterbacks are all going to keep playing each other. You flip over to what the NFC is about to start looking like. You have Hurts at the hierarchy is he's at the top right now, but it's going to be Hurts and Daniels and Caleb Williams, hopefully at some point with the Bears. Like all those NFC quarterbacks are going to start playing each other if we think they're going to be as good as we think they are.
I just saw this one too today, which I couldn't believe he said this. Cam Ward said he would launch to play for the Saints because I guess, I don't know, he said he grew up and he liked the Saints and he liked Drew Brees and he liked all these guys, and they have Kellen Moore now. And then when I heard him say this, I went, because I think Tennessee's going to be open for business for this. And the Saints didn't make the playoffs, so not picking that low. You know what? If I'm Kellen Moore and I hear this, I might call Tennessee and ask if they want Carr. And Carr plus their pick plus something else to get to number one. I don't know that isn't a semi-attractive situation, better than maybe what some of the other groups are doing to get up and do it. And I look at Kellen Moore, he's saying he wants to be there. I'll tell you what, like that actually feels like a fit to me if they could actually make that happen on his behalf and allow him to go to New Orleans. And there's no way Carr is the future there with a new young head coach. And Moore's worked with mobile quarterbacks like this, like with Hurts and Dak. Like, I don't know, man. Like, this is actually match made in heaven, if you ask me. Can the Saints get to one, get Tennessee to want Carr as a bridge quarterback for a couple of years for them, and then take all the rest of whatever the draft package is to do it and let this guy go to New Orleans? That actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Sure, it makes sense, but New Orleans constantly has to restructure all of their deals. So what's Carr's dead cap money look like if they move him? Like, it's probably some ridiculous number.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's some ridiculous number because I think they had to redo it again this offseason. I'm pretty sure they had to do it. So I'm going to guess it's probably impossible for them to move on from Carr at this moment in time. That's just my guess.
Probably. But I don't know. Just pie in the sky stuff. Hearing him say it, I went, you know what? That actually probably be a pretty good spot for him. All right, let's take a quick break. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Tracy Morgan vomited at the Knicks game last night. I won't show it to you here on YouTube because it's just gross to see, but I've seen the video of it, and obviously I hope he's okay. But boy, there's another one I didn't have on the bingo card this year was Tracy Morgan throwing up courtside at a Knicks game middle of the game too, right in the middle of the game.
That was like scary too. Like he had to be like wheelchaired out, I think is what I saw on Twitter too. So yeah, that was a weird one because also somebody was like, I think it started out as, a fan vomited. They have to delay the game for like 10 minutes. And it was like, it was Tracy Morgan. I was like, whoa, what timeline are we living in here?
Yeah. When is Eddie Murphy going to do the impression of Tracy Morgan throwing up at a Knicks game? Is that
right.
SNL next week?
Right, yeah.
We'll see. All right. I saw this one too. The LA Sparks put a call out for male practice players. And then Cameron Brink was like, gross. Because go check the replies on that one. The pervs of the run on Tuesday night at the YMCA were all like, cool, I'll go to that. And let's see her box me out. Ha, ha, ha. So yeah, of all really bad ideas, this is up there. It's really, really, really up there. Guys are guys. And in this world right now, inviting them to hang out with the WNBA players, no. Miss. Swing and a miss. Bad.
She was on, I forget the name of her podcast, but she does it normally. And this is, I think, where it started to go viral. The problem was that the Sparks actually like put out an ad, I guess, for it or a calling for it, where she said what they normally do is, this is normal in all women's basketball, by the way, that like, this is what happens. She says what they normally do was take the practice players, like literal practice players from USC that practice against those women, that women's team, and then just bring them over there. And she like was just kind of baffled of why are we going away from what we were doing before? And I agree with her. Like you find the guys that are going to be professional and work with these women and you rely on them. I wouldn't make it open season like they just did.
No, guys are guys. Like, come on now. Let's see. First four begins tonight. North Carolina, who everyone's pissed got in,
Yep.
taking on San Diego State. And if they lose tonight, then all's well that ends well. They're not actually in the main bracket. And then there's two 16 seeds are playing tonight. My crew, AU, tomorrow night out in Dayton to hopefully win the right to play Duke in North Carolina.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that is right. And then we got Caps tonight. Caps and Detroit at home tonight. I feel like they played them at home like 2 weeks ago. Didn't that just happen recently? Yeah.
Yeah, they did right before the day of the trade deadline, that Friday. Yeah, they played them.
What do you got tonight?
First home game back for the Caps. Their travel schedule was a little bit better because they played San Jose in the afternoon on Saturday. So they got to come home, and they were back home by early Sunday morning. So they actually got a day back in DC, back at practice yesterday. This is the first of 3 home games for the Caps. I expect a win tonight. The Red Wings are kind of out of it. They're fighting for a wild card spot, but I don't foresee them doing anything, especially because they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. This should be they have 15 games left here. The Caps have the 10th easiest schedule left. They only play 5 legitimate playoff contender teams the rest of the way. This is one of those 10 teams that they play down the stretch that I think they should beat handedly. And if Alex Ovechkin's going to break the record, we got to start having them score against teams like this. So I think the Caps win tonight. I think the Caps, I'll just call this like little minute detail. I think the Caps force it a little bit to Ovechkin tonight to see if he can get back on track for the record too.
All right. The Red Wings are a cautionary tale of hockey. They were like 20-something straight years in the playoffs, and they've been a nothing burger for like going on a decade now.
They have
they barely, if they do get in, it's like barely over the last decade.
Winning a playoff series, they have like one of the longest droughts in the entire NHL.
They were a dynasty.
Yeah, and it's actually really funny. Their fans like to pipe up in the replies sometimes in the NHL, and like the kids just like say like, "Who are you guys? You guys are irrelevant." Like it's crazy what happens with them. But yeah, they're struggling. And old Stevie Yzerman, who's running their show there, he's under the hot seat a little bit in my opinion. But anyways,
all right, talk to you tomorrow. Bram watch the show ESPN 6:30, the Sports Capital.